LinkedIn presents.
This is the Forbes Books Podcast, where we inspire you to achieve your dreams by sharing the stories of successful leaders and visionaries. Hola, I'm Joe Leavell, and this week, the London Book Fair, one of Europe's premier book publishing trade events, is taking place. And joining me to discuss it is Byrd Leavell, a powerhouse in the publishing industry who's co-head of publishing at UTA. Byrd represents a diverse roster of clients and has a track record of overseeing dozens of bestsellers. Now, the London Book Fair is a global marketplace that connects publishers and deal makers from all over the world to negotiate rights and distribute content across various channels. In this episode, Byrd and I will explore the challenges and opportunities facing the publishing industry today. We'll also talk about his career as a literary agent, his work at UTA, and what's happening at the book fair. Byrd, how are you?
Everything is copacetic, Joe. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So we have a lot to discuss, London Book Fair going on. But before we get there, I was fortunate enough to write a book last year, and I didn't realize the power of books until I actually did one. So if you don't mind, if we get a little esoteric, ephemeral here and talk about the power of books and why there is so much power from the page. Because I'm a longtime radio guy, dabbled in film and TV, but there's something about reading a book. What is it to you? Because you've been doing this for a long time. Talk to me about the power of books.
I love that question. I feel like it's something that you see again and again and again, that books are a real kind of cultural kind of lodestone, right? Like really shape the conversation. So why is that? Well, I think now in the year 2023, where we are all have so much coming at us, right? And what happens because of that is it actually kind of, people become kind of chicken littles, like, how's book publishing doing with all these things going on? But here's the thing, we're doing great, right? And one of the reasons we're doing great is the more you have coming at you, the more enjoyable it is to really get lost in a book. And the power of fiction is, for all of us that read fiction know, it's just about one of the best experiences you can have being in a great novel. And then the power of great nonfiction is that it can really, more than I would say most other things, really give you a lot to take away from it, right? Like, and give you, like, you can tell someone when they're really into a book and they're in that and they're talking to you about it and they're talking about all their takeaways and that how much they got out of that experience, right? And so I just think that it's a wonderful question, but I think it is, we were lucky enough that, whenever they invented the first book, God bless Gutenberg, right? When we got there, like that we haven't need to really improve on it since.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I want to pull on the thread there about the question of how's books doing. And I'm sure there's probably surveys out there that say fewer and fewer people are reading books. But man, I'm sure Amazon is I'm sure they're still selling a couple copies of books every day, and Barnes and Noble and all these independent bookstores, they're doing well. So could you give me kind of an overview about the current state of publishing, whether it's in the States or worldwide, you coming from the agent side?
Well, I love this question. All right. And I looked it up to get ready for this, which is that, all right.
We're doing some homework. I love it. All right. Let's do it.
Joe, listen, I came prepared. The books sold in the U.S. in 2022, 789 million print books. All right. I mean, think about it. Just take a minute with that number. All right. And really just because it's incredible. All right. The gross revenue of those books, about 14 billion. All right. Books sold in the world, 2.2 billion last year. Gross revenue, 81 billion. So I could keep going and breaking that down, but the larger picture about this goes back to my chicken little point, that the book publishing is thriving. It speaks to so many good things, both in the creation side and on the people who are buying these books and making it part of their life.
And so now let's get into the businessy side of things, because that's what you do. That's your business. You're on the agent side. So for the uninitiated, talk about this relationship of being a literary agent and how you go from getting a writer to connecting them with a publisher. Is it as easy as you like a manuscript falling on your desk and then you reaching out to a publisher? Is it as easy as that? Is it more complicated? Break it down for me, Byrd.
Interesting. So that is, I have to keep myself giving you too long an answer on that. So from agent to editor, right? So I think that, you could say that it is every literary agent's job to have the right manuscript on the right editor's desk at the right time, right? Our job in many ways is to know the editors at the publishing houses know what they're looking for and get them the right projects. But that's just one aspect of a very long curve, right? And that curve starts with connecting with the client, right? And there's so many different ways that happens. Like a lot of times, because there's so many different ways to do this job. You could be an agent who just specializes purely in fiction. All day long, you're going through novels and reading, and you're doing all of that, and then you're picking out the ones that you believe in, and maybe you're editing for multiple times, and then submitting, and that's your process, right? Or you could be an agent who is going out and really, because the thing about an agent is there's an element of it where you really have to go out there and find your clients, right? There's a lot of incoming, but the great clients are not out there, in nonfiction sending out queries, right? They're usually established, and you have to get to them and essentially make your case, right? And I will tell you now, as I co-run the department at UTA, is I spent a long time knocking on doors, and I don't miss it. All right, I don't miss it. All right, and Lord knows we still go out and sign clients into UTA, but now within UTA, I'm in this magical wonderland where I have access to this incredible roster of clients, and so that is a gift that is really, after doing this job for over 20 years, has become this it's a never-ending enjoyable thing.
That's so cool. And I want to dig into something that you alluded to there. You had your own literary agency, but a few years ago, you made the jump to UTA. Can you talk to me about starting your own agency from the ground up to working with one of the biggest agencies on the planet?
Well, I was very proud of what Scott Waxman and I did for the 5 years that we had Waxman Level, right? Because I worked for Scott at the Waxman Agency for 6 years, and then we had a great 5-year run and had a lot of books that are still, a lot of wonderful agents who work there, and a lot of books that are still selling to this day. So that's something I'm very proud of. But I distinctly remember walking into Scott's office, and there was a literary agent who was in UTA, and he started to do deals for those clients. And I walked into Scott's office, and I was like, what I wouldn't give to be over there. And Scott, had kind of started a publishing company, and our lease was up, and I was trying to figure out the next kind of step for me, right? And what is ironic is the wonderful agent and friend who is now my partner, Christy Fletcher. I touched base with her, and she's like, you should probably touch base with David Kramer, who was the president of UTA. So we had a cup of coffee, talked it over. 2 months later, I was starting at UTA, September of 2017. All right. So I came in. I'd never worked at a large company. I'd always kind of avoided large companies. I maybe was reading Bartleby the Scrivener in college, but I was like, I didn't know how I would feel about it. And what was funny is I put my suit on, and I walked in UTA, and I walked around, and I was like, at the end of the first day, I was like, I'm made for this. I love this. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, you have all these wonderful colleagues, and I knew there was so much potential, right? The example in Castaway. So, and Tom Hanks, and there's the cutback, and he's standing there, and he just chucked the spear at the fish. He's in the loincloth. That was kind of how I came out of being a literary agent on my own for 20 years. All right. I was like, but I had the skills, right? I could catch food in the wilderness. So then you plug me into UTA, and I was just like, this is incredible. Wow. So I knew I had the potential to build a department, right? Because it was the only Hollywood agency that didn't have a big, vibrant publishing department. So fast forward 6 years, and it's been so incredible, and it really has. And the people that I've hired, and the culture that we've built, and it has been both me and with David Kramer. He's been a part of every decision. We've done it together. And now with Curtis Brown, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and with Christy Fletcher, we have this incredible thing that is just starting to kind of come together into something that is truly special.
And part of your job there at UTA is dealing with some heavy hitters. Your lineup of people that you've worked with is pretty stellar. Is that just sort of this UTA secret sauce where it's these people seek you out because they know that you will take care of them to the very end? I mean, the list is just impressive. The Guy Razes of the world, the Rob Elliott's, Neil Strauss, all these rock stars. What's it like dealing with all these amazing people?
Well, A, it's great. All right. And I can tell you a story about sitting outside with Arnold Schwarzenegger by his fire while we worked on the book for two days and just looking around like, is this really happening? And it is. And it's every bit as amazing as you want it to be. But I think to take a step back, what I would say is that let's say 2017, I start at UTA and I start going out to LA. And I think one of the great things about UTA, and I'm sorry, I'm going to like cross the ties about UTA because I love it, and it's so just forgive me for that. But I think when I went out to LA, what was remarkable is you would go into these like very high level agents' offices, right? And they would welcome you in, and they would sit you down, and they would say, "What's your story? Like, what can we work on together?" Like, there was such an openness and a level of trust placed in me to handle these clients who their entire careers were founded upon. Right. And I really valued that trust. And it was really important to me that if anyone who engaged with our department had an incredibly positive experience, right? Which I will say also with publishing is not always a given, right? A lot of things can go wrong in all these different ways. And our job as agents is to make sure that they don't. So that dynamic, that kind of level of welcoming was what we could build the whole department on. We could go out and then you could get, a lot of times it's us going to them being like, this, you have this client, they're fabulous. They're Seth Rogen. Seth Rogen has to do a book, right? So you get on the phone with Seth Rogen and you introduce yourself and then you talk it through and you kind of find an idea that he's excited about. And then he starts writing it. And then he sends the first story and it's hilarious. And then you call him and he sends another, and then you send the pages out to editors, the publishing houses, and set the meeting up. And then Seth's in the room and he's talking about the book and everyone's vibing about it. And it's like you find the perfect publisher and crown and you oversee the process. So that's what we do.
I never realized that a literary agent was so hands-on, or is this maybe just something, an outlier in your industry? Because I feel like in other industries, agents are very much, they're sort of like the connective tissue, putting the 2+2 together. But you seem very hands-on from the jump when it comes to these books. Is that normal for your industry, or maybe I just misread how the whole industry works?
I think it is normal. I think that the thing about literary agents is that there's some who do the job, and everyone does the job in different ways. But I think across, the lion's share of the literary agents you interact with are really intrinsically involved in the creative process, right? Not fiction or fiction, because I think it is. Because the thing with these editors at these publishing houses is you got to think about it in terms of like risk mitigation, right? Like most books don't work. You have to just be pragmatic about that. You understand that the way the business is set up is they put the books in the market. Everyone tries to make it work. Some of them catch, a lot of them don't, and the winners pay for everything else, right? So what we need to do for these editors of these publishing houses is try and remove as much of that feeling of risk as possible, right? So because I could have just called up editors and be like, "What do you want to give me for Seth Rogen?" The whole process would have been doomed from the start, right? Because they would know how good the book was going to be. Seth wouldn't have really had to commit early and kind of really find his voice in terms of being an author of his first book. So we really invest a lot in trying to get the voice on the page for the client and also for the editors, so everyone knows what the book's going to be, right? And then to oversee every aspect of the process.
That's fascinating. Wow. So, I hate to say this about editors, Ben, but it seems like you do all the work for them.
Yeah, no, we do. We're pushing that snowball at the top of the mountain, right? And then, but that snowball has to keep building up into that publication day. And what those editors do, because one of the great things about publishing is the people who work within it, right? These editors are very committed to their jobs. And what they need to do then is take that, that book and like really shepherd it so that it is the manuscript is the best possible version of itself when it goes to the printer, right? And then they need to get their colleagues on board, and they need to get their entire sales team on board, and they need to get the publicist and the marketing director on board to really help with the launch. You know what I mean? There's so much that they have to do, the covers and the packaging and all those things, and figuring out the printing and then to keep buying books on the other, while they're working on yours. Like they, what I mean? There's so much they have to do in order to really get that book to market in the way it needs to be.
Sweet. You mentioned Schwarzenegger, the London Book Show is going on. I want to ask you about this because from what I understand, this thing is ginormous. Like everyone who is in publishing is involved with the London Book Fair. What's it all about for folks not familiar with it?
You know what is? I'm sorry, I'm so positive about everything, but I am. It's both how I'm wired, and I really enjoy my job. So I'm just going to stay in
Yeah,
this
man.
space, Joe. You understand? But I think it's like the great thing about the book fair is one of the agents in our department said to me is, people have this, and they're selling like aluminum siding, right? There are all these other
Yeah.
fairs, right, that people show up for. And what you have to imagine at the London Book Fair, the Frankfurt Book Fair, and a lot of the really big ones, is the heads of publishing houses come from all over the world, right? From that 80 billion that I
Hmm.
told you about. And they all show up in these huge convention centers, and they have their stands, and like Arnold will have a huge poster of his book Be Useful at this. I can't wait to see, right? But then there's another thing called the Right Center. And what the Right Center is, when you look at it, is it gets into this aspect of what we do, where you're either, when you do a deal with a U.S. publisher, you can do a deal for North American rights, right, or for world rights or world English rights. And what that means is, if it's North American, then you're giving that American publisher the right to publish that book in English in America and Canada. And if you're doing world English, you're giving them the English rights to publish it in America and England. And if you're selling them world, you're giving them translation rights all over the world. But if we're doing a North American deal, then our foreign rights team is going with this glorious packet of all the books that we have, fiction and nonfiction, the translation rights for,
Hmm.
right? And they will sit there, and I'll do a lot of these meetings myself, and they're every 30 minutes. And the head of a publishing house from Brazil will sit down, and they'll be like, "We like this, or we don't like this." And you're like, "Well, if I got the book for you," and then you're really pitching your books, right? So you're pitching this art, you're pitching this commerce, you're pitching this business of ideas. You're not pitching aluminum
Yeah.
siding. And so it's this kind of fabulous thing when you hear this hubbub of commerce. And it's going to be so great this year, like post-pandemic, finally, with everybody going and the parties and all the stuff. But the vibe within the Right Center is its own very special thing, because it's this hum of these people just hanging out and pitching each other
So
books.
cool. To me, the way you describe it, it's like a convention meets a film festival, because there is like the conventioneering of like glad handling and all that stuff, but then the film festival deal making. Is that a pretty good way to describe it?
That's exactly right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, so you name drop Schwarzenegger. That was very smooth of you earlier before, Byrd. I like how you did that. I'm just sitting
That's
around. We don't know
what I
Schwarzenegger.
do.
Yeah, yeah. You're so Hollywood,
Yeah,
Byrd.
yeah, I
Well,
am.
let's talk. Well, you mentioned it's called Be Useful. You'll be rolling that at the London Book Fair. What's that? What's the gist of that one?
So this is one where I reached out to Arnold's agent, who is himself a bit of a legend. He also represents Harrison Ford, and his name's Jim Burkus. And I said, Jim, we have got to get Arnold to do a book. It's been over 10 years since he did his memoir, and it should be something kind of short and small that really takes all this life advice he's been giving people since forever. And I compared it to the huge book Make Your Bed,
Mhm.
right? Because I'm fascinated by Make Your Bed. Make Your Bed, I think, is 17,000 words, sold millions of copies, and it just kind of really occupies that space perfectly. So lo and behold, eventually Arnold comes back, and he's super into the idea, and he even has the title, because it's something his dad used to always say to him, which was "Be useful." And so what we've done then is we've taken 7 rules. This is his process, right? This is how, whether it was bodybuilding, being the biggest actor on the planet, running one of the biggest economies, in the country / world in California, this is what got him through each of those
Interesting.
places. It publishes October 10th, and I just cannot wait for people to start to engage with that.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure that'll be an easy sell at the book fair. Another one I saw that you guys are going to be rolling is Sahil Bloom's The Wealth Lie. You got to make sure you send me a copy of that, but also can you just give me a quick little thumbnail about that one?
For sure. Sahil is remarkable. And I think with that, the wealth lie rejects the notion that money is the only form of wealth and should be our ultimate goal, right? This is done by my incredible agent in my department, who's one of my close friends, PLR Queen, right? One of the best hires I made, right? And so Sahil gets into, so many of us are just wired, living these lives of quiet desperation, trying to make money and thinking that's where our happiness is,
Mhm.
right? And then what he breaks down in this book is why that is not true, right? And how to live a life of fulfillment that is not oriented in that direction.
All right. So make sure you make a note to send that one to me, Byrd, when you get a chance. Do you have any other book you can throw in before without giving away too many company secrets?
For sure. I mean, I think this is breaking news, but we'll be selling the next book by Malala, which is very exciting. So that will get a lot of attention. And I'm just flipping through the guide I told you about before. There's so many great books in here. Gretchen Rubin is someone we represent. Of course, she did the Happiness Project, her book Life in Five Senses, We have an unbelievable relationship guide by a woman named Tinks, right, called The Shift, which is about kind of empowerment. And I think that book could really be one of the kind of defining books in that space. And I could keep going. I won't make you go through it all, but you get the idea. There's just one of the great things about the department where we are now. We have so much to pitch, right? We have all these great projects.
Yeah, and now you mentioned a little while ago when you're talking about Schwarzenegger about Harrison Ford. Can we get a Harrison Ford book? Like, Byrd, can you work on that, please?
I mean, can we? I mean, believe me, I have. The man needs to do a book, and we will get him eventually. But it is we haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, man. Oh, man. As an 80s kid, Star Wars and Indiana Jones, man.
I will tell you, I have Zoomed with him, and it is just like I've gotten to a place in my career where I can play it cool with almost anyone. But when he hops on the Zoom, you're just like, it really takes you a minute to kind of find your voice.
Let me ask you, without getting into the specifics of the conversation, what's it like to have a Zoom call with Han Solo? I mean, what is he like virtually?
I would say that he's fun. You know what I mean? Like, this is a man who's been at the top of the game for so long, and it was such an enjoyable conversation to start to figure out what the book could be and what his thoughts were and what he didn't want. So, like, once we got started, and once you got over your own shock of talking to Harrison Ford, he was just fun. He was just totally into it.
Oh my God, that sounds so awesome, man. Well, good luck. But if you do me a favor, shoot me a text when you get that book deal done because I am going to be first in line to get that mother. That I cannot wait for that.
I hope it happens.
So, let's wrap things up by talking about books in terms of why. For an entrepreneur out here listening, my company publishes books for entrepreneurs, CEOs. Can you talk about the impact of what a book means to someone who's a high net worth, high leverage individual? Like we've talked about, you have a lot of celebrities in your stable. What does a book do for these people? Like what's the why for the book? And I know obviously there's probably everyone has their own different why, but is there like an overarching why as to why someone who's incredibly successful, uber wealthy, why they would want to write a book?
There are a bunch of answers to that. And it's a good question. I think like it gets back to what we were discussing, like, yeah, hey, why it's great to work in publishing. I think, which is that, like, for someone in that position, okay, one key point that your book is something you have complete control of, right? Like, if you go out and you do interviews or whatever the case may be, you're giving over control. But in a book, you control every sentence in it. You control how it is packaged. You put it out into market, and it becomes this like sacrosanct thing that you created that you can refer to again and again. And also, it's a great way fundamentally to help people. Like, if you want to help people and you feel like you've learned a lot along the way and you feel like you have a lot to share, people are looking for books to answer questions and to help them. There's so many unhappy people there, are people looking for guidance to get out, to get unstuck. And I feel like a great book does that, right? And you can go and you can find authors who've really sold a lot of copies in space. You look at the Amazon reviews, and the people they use that phrase life-changing all the time, because a book can still do that. And then to continue it, I think what I say is that a New York Times bestseller is the rising tide that raises all boats. Like, that's the thing. It was to your point about the cultural resonance of a book, right? Is if you approach the process and you can support it, you can find the right publisher, and you can find a way to overcome those odds and make that book work. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling thing through the conversations. Like, I mean, good Lord, we could spend an hour talking about Atomic Habits. It's fascinating. And I think that is, you see again and again the power that book can have to help everything else that you're doing.
All right. And you personally, what's your book radar like when you see a manuscript or when you're pitched by someone or someone's asking you about a book? Because I'm sure, Byrd, while you were walking around Hollywood, everyone
I'm
has
from Virginia. Listen,
No, I know, but when
yeah.
you go to the mothership, you're walking
Yeah.
around, everyone's got a script, everyone's got a book. What's that thing that says this is something I want to be involved with? Because at the end of the day, it's not just money, it's time. And as much as we can buy everything, we can't buy more time. So your time, I'm sure, is incredibly important to you. So what is it that sets off that like book radar in Byrd's brain that says, I want to be involved in that project? Is there something, or is it just too kind of magical to put into words?
No, I can answer that. I feel like how do you feel that kind of magic fairy dust when you engage with something good? One way I think about it is that you can tell it when, again with nonfiction, because fiction is art, right? With fiction is like you can tell like if someone has it within the first 1 page to 50 pages. You know what I
Really?
mean? I really think you can. And with nonfiction, if you're talking about a book proposal, one thing I look for is like, is that person doing that book out of ego? Right? Is it just purely like I have achieved and now I will do this book? Because that's not a good reason at all to approach the process, right? But instead, if you see within their description of the book or in the book proposal or whatever it is presented to you, that there is a real desire to reach a lot of people, right? That's the key thing. Book publishing is a business as well, right? So if people have put the thought, if they've read books that their book would be compared to, that's one of the first things I look for. Is this person a reader? Do they understand the market that they're trying to enter? Or is it, again, just coming back to a kind of reflexive, like, now I will do a book? Like, no, you have to put the thought into it to understand why other books have worked. And is there something new and different about your book? I think that's a really key thing. Like, is it like, what are you trying to impart? Why is someone going to pay $28 for this book and spend X hours of their life with it? Like, what are your answers to those questions? And if someone has put the thought into it and they have good answers to those questions, then that's the pixie dust. You're like, okay, we can work with this. This is someone who is approaching this for the right reasons, and I can play my part to help them through this process to make it happen.
So in other words, if a former radio personality wrote a book about his years working in radio and talking about the importance of conversation and connecting with other humans, that's the kind of magic you're talking about, right?
That is a great book, and someone should do that book. And whoever's listening to this should go buy 10 copies of that book. And that's
I think it's called Good Listen, but I'm just saying that hypothetically, if it was called Good Listen, that would
sound fabulous. That sounds like the best idea I've heard in months.
Cool. And on a light note to wrap this up, what is the most random pitch you ever got? Because I'm sure you get a random email or running into someone on the street, or maybe a family gathering when they find out, oh, that guy over there, that's Byrd. He's a literary agent. You should tell him about your book. What's the most random one you got?
Well, I'll tell you something that happened to me 2 weeks ago. Is I texted someone and I texted the wrong number. And that person replied and they said, I'm sorry, you think you have the wrong number. And then there's a minute. And then she was like, listen, I can't help myself, but your name showed up in the text and I see that you're a literary agent and I actually have a book. Can I send it to you? So I was like, either this is going to be the best story ever about how I found a novelist, right? Or this is just a testament to how many people out there have books, which I also will say this, and this is a key point. Anyone who has put their phone down and turned off TikTok and turned off their TV and has spent time creating a book, that is something to be admired. I mean, it's very easy to go to a place of critique of the quality of that book, but like to believe in yourself and to give it a shot, like even after doing this job for as long as I've been doing it, I have never lost that appreciation for that. I really believe that.
I love that. No, that's great. Now, I believe, isn't that how Malcolm Gladwell got discovered? He texted someone in the middle of the night. It was like a literary agent.
Why couldn't it be me? Why couldn't it be me? I know.
Well, Byrd, it's been a blast talking to you. It sounds like you got some great things going over there at UTA, London Book Fair. Thanks so much for the time. Thank you for taking all my random questions and being able to answer them wholeheartedly. And you can not think that I'm a psychopath with these random questions. So I really appreciate it, Byrd.
Joe, this was such a pleasure. I really enjoy the fact you took the time, and I look forward to keeping the conversation going.
Absolutely. And that'll do it for this episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to subscribe to automatically receive new episodes when they're dropped. And if you have a moment, a review on Apple or Spotify would be greatly appreciated. It would help more amazing entrepreneurs like you find the show. Let's connect on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Joe Partavilla. And please, don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.